Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So, not too long ago, back in the middle of June, I did an episode titled, What's on the Ban List Radar? Basically, the Rules Committee said that they have their eyes on some cards, so I decided to hypothesize what those cards might be. And the first card I brought up, the main card that I was discussing, is actually front and center in this image with Hullbreacher. And actually, it was just revealed on the Rules Committee's website where they had an announcement saying that Hullbreacher is in fact now banned in Commander. So first up, let's jump into Hullbreacher and talk about exactly what it does and why it was banned. Hullbreacher is a 3/2 Merfolk Pirate with Flash that costs 2 and a blue. It says if an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, instead you create a treasure token. Here's what the Rules Committee had to say about the ban. Hullbreacher has been a problem card since its release. Its ostensible defense used against card draw has been dwarfed by offensively combining it with mass draw effects to easily strip players' hands while accelerating the controller. That play pattern isn't something we want prevalent in casual play, see the Leovold ban. And we have seen a lot of evidence that it is too tempting even there as it combines with wheels and other popular casual staples. The case against the card was overwhelming. There remain a few similar cards that are still permitted, notably Notion Thief and Narset Parter of Veils. The additional hoops required, an additional color pit for Notion Thief, and sorcery speed for Narset appear to be keeping them to the appropriate level of play, though we'll continue to keep an eye on them. So, Hullbreacher is a very overpowered card, and yeah, that was pretty evident the second that it was spoiled back in the end of 2020 in Commander Legends. What made it especially problematic is the way that it's worded, and it definitely could have been worded in a different way and it would have been less problematic, but here it is. I think the key problematic word on this card is actually just the word instead. If an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, you create a treasure token. If it didn't have that word instead, then you wouldn't be denying card draw. So because of that word instead, you not only deny the card draw, but you also get a benefit from that, making treasure. Basically, you shut down draws and you get a ton of mana, and this is very easy to use and abuse in a lot of decks and with a lot of cards. The cards that easily abuse it are wheel effects such as Windfall and of course the original Wheel of Fortune. Windfall is a sorcery that costs 2 and a blue, and it says each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. And Wheel of Fortune is a sorcery that costs 2 and a red, and its Oracle text reads, each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. Essentially, most wheels work in similar ways where players just discard their hands and then draw a certain number of cards. So essentially, in combination with Hullbreacher, this effect is incredibly brutal and very game-ending. It's also very easy to pull off, and wheels are very prevalent in Commander, so yeah, it's not hard to do. By casting a wheel with this in play, your opponents lose their hands, you just lose your hand and draw a new hand, and then you get a ton of treasure from all the cards that your opponents didn't draw. So you've got a ton of mana with a full hand, and your opponents are left with absolutely nothing, and yeah, you're gonna win from there. Also, you can obviously just flash this in when someone else wheels or when someone else casts a big draw spell for a similar effect. Like the Rules Committee said though, this play pattern isn't something that they want prevalent in casual play, and they've seen a lot of evidence that it's, well, seeing play there. When I made that ban list radar episode, Hullbreacher was at 18% of eligible decks, which is a ton. Especially considering that it is a decently expensive card, and yeah, that price is probably going to drop after this banning, but yeah, this card was 20, 30 bucks, something around there. So although it had a play pattern that many casual groups might not enjoy, it was still seeing quite a bit of play, so that was the reason for its ban. Now, a somewhat similar ban to this one, which was mentioned in their announcement, was the Leovold ban, which happened quite some time ago. In fact, if my searching was correct, it was all the way back in April of 2017. Leovold Emissary of Tress is a 3/3 elf advisor that costs black, green, blue. It has each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn, and whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So again, in a similar way to Hullbreacher, this one basically has, hey, if you wheel, your opponents are basically left with nothing. I mean, they do get to draw one card, but that's it. Obviously, also, since Leovold is a legendary creature, you can have it as your commander, and yeah, that's problematic. And even though Hullbreacher isn't legendary, it's still problematic being in a deck, especially since it can fit in a ton of decks out there. Hullbreacher has a very easy color identity requirement, just being in any deck that has blue. Next up, let's talk about a similar card that they mentioned that they have their eyes on with Notion Thief. Notion Thief is a 3/1 human rogue with flash that costs 2 blue/black, and it says if an opponent would draw a card except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So essentially the same thing as Hullbreacher in a way, but yeah, instead of getting treasure, you're drawing their cards for them. Regardless, like they mentioned in their announcement, this one does have an additional hoop to jump through in that it does have an extra pip in its color identity, being black. So there are less decks out there that can run this, but that being said, there are plenty of decks still running it. Again, Hullbreacher was at 18% of eligible decks, and Notion Thief is at 14%, so not too far off from there. Again, there is a difference in the number of decks, though, since there are less decks that can run this. But the other one that was mentioned that, again, is less restrictive than this one is Narset, Parter of Veils. Narset is a legendary planeswalker Narset with 5 loyalty that costs 1 blue/blue. She has a static ability, each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, and she's also got a -2, but that's not why she's being looked at. Again, that static ability essentially makes it so that your opponents can't draw more than 1 card every turn, so if you wheel, they're getting 1 card back. Now, unlike Hullbreacher, you're not getting treasure for each of those cards that they don't draw, and unlike Notion Thief, you're not drawing for them, but yeah, you're still shutting out people from drawing more cards. Now, unlike Hullbreacher, this one doesn't have flash, so again, it's just on their watch list. It's not currently banned, but that doesn't mean that it won't be banned in the future. According to EDH Rack, this one currently sees play in over 38,000 decks, or in other words, 13% of eligible decks. So yeah, this one definitely sees a good amount of play. And it definitely is a comparable card to Hullbreacher, so we'll see if it's banned in the future as well. And actually, I'm pretty sure that when Hullbreacher was originally spoiled, the 2 cards that I brought up were most similar to it were Narset and Smothering Tithe, and it's kind of like a combination of both. In case you don't know, Smothering Tithe is an enchantment that costs 3 and a white, and it says whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color. So yeah, again, in a way, Hullbreacher is kind of like a melding of the two, plus it's got flash, so yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. Now this is actually the first ban in a long time, and please correct me if I'm incorrect in the comments below, but I believe that our last bans in Commander were Lutri the Spell Chaser and Flash, and that was all the way back in April of 2020. Lutri was banned basically right when it was spoiled because it's essentially a free extra card for any deck that's running blue and red. It has Companion, each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name, and yeah, in Commander that's essentially not a restriction at all because it's a singleton format. So there essentially wouldn't be any reason for basically every single blue and red deck to run this free 101st card. So then decks that are blue and red would essentially have a free advantage because they always get this Companion. And they actually get that Companion without having to make any deck adjustments or any kind of a cost for it. And then Flash was banned completely for competitive Commander, otherwise known as CEDH. So it's been a long time, I believe over a year since we've actually seen a ban in Commander, and Hullbreacher now has taken the title for the newest ban. Now, personally, do I think more cards are going to get banned in the near future that are Hullbreacher-like? I'm not exactly sure. Both Narset, Parter of Veils, and Notion Thief could very well be on the chopping block, but yeah, bans in Commander are few and far between for the most part, so I don't see another ban coming in the near future. But of course, I could be very wrong about that. Regardless, again, Hullbreacher was in a ton of decks out there. So if you were running it in one of your decks, you're going to have to replace it, and yeah, there really isn't any kind of a direct replacement for this card. I guess Narset, though, is the closest thing to it. Now I just want to bring up a couple of commanders that were running this card pretty heavily in a lot of decks, and first up there's the Locust God, and Hullbreacher was in 48% of Locust God decks. Locust God says whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste, so yeah, wheeling in this deck is already a good thing, so putting Hullbreacher in there is a really good thing. Another one would be Niv-Mizzet Perrin, which had Hullbreacher in 34% of its decks, and Niv-Mizzet's a pretty popular commander. Niv-Mizzet also wants you to draw a bunch of cards, and when you do, you can ping down some targets, so yeah, Niv-Mizzet's all about wheeling as well, and this is definitely a card that worked well with it. And speaking of wheels, there's Nekusar the Mindrazor, and Hullbreacher saw play in 32% of those decks. Nekusar says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an initial card, and whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar the Mindrazor deals 1 damage to that player. So yeah, Nekusar decks want to wheel quite a bit, and even though Hullbreacher works in a different way, obviously can still help you win the game. And then another wheel commander like Riel the Everwise saw Hullbreacher seeing play in 39% of its decks. Riel says whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So essentially she doubles up your first wheel. And then with Hullbreacher, you shut your opponents out from drawing cards and you get a ton of treasure, and now you've got twice as many cards to play with and win with. But perhaps one of the highest percentages for Hullbreacher with Brawlin and Shabrazz. In a deck built around these partner commanders, Hullbreacher saw play in 64% of those decks. Brawlin has, whenever you discard a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Brawlin's Skyshark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And Shabrazz says, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabrazz's Skyshark, and you gain 1 life. Basically, when you wheel, you get benefits from both discarding and drawing cards, so yeah, Hullbreacher can fit right in. Or at least I should say it could when it was legal, but now it is banned. Now, overall, is this news all that surprising? Not really. Again, like many others correctly guessed, Hullbreacher was very much an easy card to identify as a card that's probably on the Rules Committee's ban list radar. It was an overpowered and push card that led to what might be seen as an undesirable play pattern in casual play. There are certain things in play patterns that casual players will regulate, like mass land destruction, but this wasn't one of them clearly. Regardless, now this episode is wrapping up and I would love to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this ban are. Do you think this ban was justified or not, and why? And also, why don't you let me know what other cards you think might get banned in the future and why? Again, I brought some up on the What's on the Ban List Radar episode, and yeah, if you haven't seen that one, make sure you check it out first, but yeah, there are plenty of other ones that could get banned that I might not have mentioned. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one.